Part 29. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 281. When Li Anping gently pressed his palm on the cabin of the plane, the entire plane was instantly wrapped by the void force field. The mind swept the entire cabin, and Li Anping roughly understood what was going on within a second. Hijacking. The next moment, the entire plane shook violently, and began to slowly slow down under the effect of the void force field. Just like being grabbed by a huge palm, Li Anping intended to use the void force field to hold the plane and send him to the capital airport. In the cabin, everyone felt such an obviously abnormal vibration, and most passengers panicked. What's going on? Did you encounter air currents? Are they going to blow up the plane? Some people lowered their heads, closed their eyes, and kept praying, Amitabha, Amitabha. Seeing the whole cabin in chaos, and even several passengers trying to stand up, the bearded jihadist roared, "Be quiet, whoever moves, I will kill him." As he said, he first pointed the machine gun at a male passenger who was eager to stand up. Following his order, several other hijackers also pointed their machine guns at nearby passengers. "Hey, brother, don't be nervous." The male passenger who was pointed at by the gun immediately turned pale and waved his hand to sit back. Seeing that the passengers in the cabin had quieted down again, the bearded man nodded, signaled his companions with his eyes, and planned to turn around and go to the cockpit to take a look. He was also worried that something had happened to the plane just now. But at the moment he turned around, his pupils suddenly dilated, and he looked at the top of the cabin with surprise. "I saw an arm poking through the shell of the plane as if it was tofu and reaching in. Then another hand reached in. As easy as tearing open a packaging bag, Li Anping easily tore a huge hole in the top of the plane." The bearded man screamed, "Be careful. It's a person with special abilities." The next moment, a figure fell from the gap on the top of the plane. In the world that ordinary people cannot see, the black mind energy filled the gap, isolating the airflow inside and outside the plane. At the moment Li Anping landed, 6 hijackers had already pointed their guns at him, and 6 sparks lit up in the cabin at the same time, accompanied by crisp gunshots, covering Li Anping with a barrage of death. Superhuman perception, speed, reaction, plus the mind energy covering the entire plane, allowed Li Anping to watch the world as if watching a slow motion. Bullets flying in the air. The distorted expressions of the hijackers and the terrified looks of the passengers all fell into his eyes. There are 7 hijackers in total in addition to the 6 people in front of you. There is another person in the cockpit. 1 crew member died, and there are no casualties among the passengers for the time being. 6 bullets missed, they will kill 2 passengers. The plane is too fragile, use your abilities to attack first. A series of information flashed through Li Anping's mind like lightning, and the black mind energy had solidified all the bullets in the air. This was the method that Qing Chan used in the past with his massive mind energy. Although Li Anping's total amount of mind energy is still not as good as Qing Chan's, it is more than enough in the narrow environment of an airplane. After using mind energy to fix the bullets, a strong force swept across, and the 6 hijackers' eyes went black. They lost consciousness and fainted on the ground. All of them were directly absorbed by Li Anping in an instant. Ordinary people facing Li Anping head-on would not even be qualified to escape. In the eyes of the crowd, they could only see that the 6 ferocious hijackers had fallen to the ground after the gunshots. And the air around them was full of motionless bullets. Mortals cannot see the mind, so for them, the bullets were motionless in the air. The next second, all the bullets fell to the ground, making a series of noises. Looking at the passengers who were still in shock, Li Anping shouted, "It's okay. The criminals have been dealt with, but before the plane lands, please stay in your seats for the time being." As soon as Li Anping finished speaking, he saw a flash of light suddenly appear in the cabin. Someone was taking a picture of him with a mobile phone. "It's Lord Li Anping." We are saved. Long live Li Enping. Long live Daxia. Looking at the passengers who took out their mobile phones to take pictures, and some began to cheer. Hugging and crying with joy, Li Enping shook his head and walked towards the cockpit. Originally, with the radius of soul absorption, he could kill this jihadist directly, but this was the last one anyway, so Li Enping still planned to leave a Cao Jiao alive for Yang Guang and the others. Maybe he could get some information from him. He pushed the door and found that it was locked. Once the door of the cockpit of this kind of aircraft is locked from the inside to the outside, there is absolutely no way for people outside to open it. It should be okay if I use a little bit of force. Li Enping's palm touched the door, and then the whole door began to vibrate violently, as if it was kneaded by a giant hand, and kept shrinking towards the center of the door. In the horrified eyes of the two people behind the door, the whole door was kneaded into a fist-sized iron ball by the void force field, and then was grabbed by Li Enping in his palm. Behind the cabin door, the gentleman was holding a pistol against the captain's head. When he saw that it was Li Enping who appeared behind the cabin door, his eyes flashed with endless anger and excitement. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something. But he found that his body was completely out of control. The black mind energy that he couldn't even see had already wrapped up his entire body. Let alone shooting, he couldn't even think of saying a word. Li Enping was too lazy to listen to the shouting of such a small fry. After subduing the other party, he sat directly in the co-pilot's seat and said to the captain beside him, "You point me in the direction, I will send the plane to the capital airport." But the captain answered Li Enping's slowly raised palm. As Li Enping's palm rose, the entire plane actually began to rise. Then as Li Enping's palm turned, the entire plane began to turn. Originally, Li Enping didn't need to move his palm to control the void force field, but in order to make the captain understand faster, he made this move. This looks very intuitive, as if the entire plane is moving with the movement of the palm. The captain looked at Li Enping in surprise. At this time, he seemed to recognize Li Enping's identity and said excitedly, "Sir, is this your superpower?" Li Enping looked at him and nodded, "I have never learned to fly a plane. Please help me point the direction of the capital airport." The captain nodded excitedly. He didn't expect to be able to cooperate with Li Enping today. Next, he began to restore communication with the control tower while telling Li Enping the approximate direction of the capital airport in as straightforward language as possible. In fact, Li Enping only needs to know the direction. His void force field is like an invisible hand holding the plane, basically like a child holding a toy airplane. The plane is completely in his control, and it can be said that he can control it as if he were at the mercy of his arm. 20 minutes later, the passenger plane appeared above the capital airport. According to the command of the control tower, Li Enping directly descended the plane vertically and stopped it on a runway. The next day, news about the plane hijacking filled the front pages of all newspapers, and Li Enping's name once again swept the entire network and major media. But unlike the focus of ordinary people, many Daxia high-level officials have set their sights on Li Enping's special plane. They found that Claudia returned with Li Enping on the special plane. The information they got from the crew of the special plane, especially the flight attendant, made them feel more anxious. In some directions, they have fallen behind the Ice Castle barbarians. In the Imperial study in the palace, Yang Guang and Yan Bei are reporting to Li Enping about some recent events. Li Enping touched his chin and said slowly, "Have you found out about the jihad organization?" Yang Guang replied, "In fact, we started tracking the jihad organization half a year ago, but all of their members are ordinary people. Although they are not strong in frontal combat capabilities, they are very good at sabotaging behind the scenes and specialize in absorbing civilians and orphans in southern Xinjiang, especially in India and the West. In addition, southern Xinjiang has not yet covered our intelligence network. Although we have wiped it out several times, it always revives like weeds. We suspect that Western countries are funding them behind the scenes. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Lang-go. Chapter 282. The jihadist organization is one of the terrorist organizations that was born after most countries in the eastern continent joined the Pan-Continental Alliance. Similar to him are the blood source of Ice Castle, the Avengers in southern Xinjiang, etc. Originally, there were similar radical organizations in Dongyang, but because if they wanted to survive in Dongyang, they had to be protected by Takuchi Sita, so similar organizations were quickly destroyed in Dongyang. Yang Guang looked at Li Anping's face and saw no change, then continued, "The leader of this jihadist organization is very mysterious and has never appeared in front of his men. We don't know anything about his details, but there is no doubt that he has strong inciting, mobilizing, and organizing power. With the slogan of liberating the entire southern Xinjiang, he is very deceptive and can often brainwash some southern Xinjiang people with lower cultural levels into become a fanatical believer in their organization. In a hijacking case like this one, all those involved had the belief that they would die. And because there is a huge amount of financial support behind them, their destructive power has been greatly enhanced." Li Anping nodded and tapped the table in front of him with his knuckles. "Tell me about that living person." "His name is Isis Luo, a native of Fowlin. He was originally a college student studying in Ice Castle, but he was introduced to participate in the jihad last year." Yang Guang organized the language, and then said, according to his confession, he was on winter vacation this year. After returning to Fallon, he participated in a series of trainings, and even applied to drop out of school, gave up his university studies, and cut off contact with his parents. They have been preparing for this hijacking operation for half a year. The goal is to warn Daxia, stimulate Folan's resistance movement, and other such things. Li Anping asked, "Did he explain this all by himself?" "Of course not." Yang Guang frowned and said, "This guy has been severely brainwashed. After the regular interrogation had no effect, we used some methods. But the effect was still insignificant. In the end, we could only invite a few ability users from the Wang family to general he hypnotizes." At this point, Yang Guang's eyes also showed a bit of anger. "Sir, although the members of the jihad organization are ordinary people, their thoughts are too fanatical. They are like lunatics who are not afraid of death. The damage caused is getting bigger and bigger. I suggest that we spread our intelligence network to southern Xinjiang as soon as possible and completely wipe out this organization." Li Anping was silent and did not agree immediately, because this was not something he could do if he wanted to. Because the best and most powerful part of Daxia's intelligence system comes from Li Qian's ability, but Li Qian also has limits. Unless her energy level can be improved again, as the surveillance scope expands, there will always be times when her abilities are not enough. But Li Anping thought about it and realized that Li Qian was not someone with extraordinary talents like Jing Guang, Bai Xing, and Emma. Although her ability is powerful, it is impossible to continuously improve it in a short period of time. Moreover, Li Qian's surveillance ability can obtain very detailed information about targets. Using it for large-scale surveillance is a bit wasteful in the long run. Maybe on a large scale. It is better to monitor through high-tech means, but for individual important people, it is monitored through Li Qian's ability." Thinking of this, Li Anping put the complete unification plan of intelligence data on the agenda. The so-called complete integration of intelligence data refers to the integration of all personal data and personal information into the National Intelligence Network currently developed by MoMo. For example, everyone's mobile phone information, everyone's network account number, IP, and computer information are usually collected quietly by various internet companies and used for various business activities. In addition, there are hotels, banks, travel agencies, insurance, airplanes, trains, traffic police, etc., and even every camera in the country. If all this information is unified and put into the National Intelligence Network that MoMo is now in charge of, then I am afraid that everyone in this country will no longer have any secrets in front of the government. unless the person completely breaks away from society. Originally, even if the government stepped in to integrate something like this, it would be absolutely impossible for it to be successfully integrated. The interests of all parties involved are so intricate that even gods can't figure them out. But Li Anping is different. He doesn't need to sort out the underlying issues. He only needs one order, and everyone must follow his instructions. If something gets stuck, it can be easily confirmed based on the information provided by Li Qian in the existing intelligence network. Then the stuck part will be forcibly opened by Daxia Lonke, and it will be executed all the way until it is completed. Never in human history has the power of the country been so concentrated in the hands of one person. There has never been a moment like this when Li Anping's power alone surpasses the combined power of all the people in the country. Any plan that could not be promoted in the past can be implemented in this environment. However, for the time being, this set of work will be implemented on a few pilot projects in Daxia. When there are no problems, it will be rolled out across the country and even the entire eastern continent. After Li Anping determined the omni-channel intelligence integration plan in his mind, he thought about it and decided on several sub-plans such as facial recognition, full network monitoring, and satellite monitoring. This will make the intelligence network denser. It is conceivable that when the entire intelligence network is completely rolled out, all people in society will be covered by an invisible network, tightly tied, and suffocated. Therefore, these plans must be carried out in secret and must not be disclosed to the general public. Li Anping also thought that if these plans could be completed and Momo could develop artificial intelligence, more than 90% of government officials could be laid off. You still have to take your time. Yang Guang on the side saw Li Anping's wandering eyes and shouted softly, "Sir." Li Anping came to his senses. What? Then how to deal with the jihad issue this time? Li Anping's eyes flashed with a blade-like light. I will leave the jihad to you personally this time. In terms of manpower, you can tell me whoever you want. I have only one request. I don't want to see anything like this again this time it happened. As ordered. After saying that, Yang Guang's face straightened, and after accepting the order, he bowed and retreated, leaving Yan Bei and Li Anping in the study. Li Anping glanced at Yan Bei and asked, "What's going on?" Yan Bei lowered his head and said respectfully, "It's about the Avengers. We destroyed their base in southern Xinjiang and captured the leader of the Avengers, Peter Parker." Li Anping said, "Yes, is there any problem?" But last year in Emerald City, Peter Parker rescued Tian Haoan. According to our intelligence, Tian Wenhao later joined the Avengers, but we did not find him this time. Tian Haoan. A series of information about the other party flashed through Li Anping's mind, and finally stopped at the image of Tian Haoan standing in front of the parade. If Yan Bei hadn't mentioned it, Li Anping would never have remembered such a little person. He said indifferently, "In this kind of organization, it is normal for some fish to be caught after the personnel are dispersed." "What, does he have a problem?" Yan Bei nodded, thought about it, and then said bravely, "Tian Haoan requires us to release Peter Parker and all the arrested Avengers members in the past. Otherwise, he will disclose the secrets of the 8th Research Institute." After finishing speaking, after this, Yan Bei lowered his head and no longer dared to meet Li Anping's eyes. At the same time as he finished these words, Yan Bei felt a terrible murderous aura coming towards his face. He had experienced countless killings in the past year, and his strength had reached the 4th level. Only now did he feel, it turns out that he is so weak. Just like a small boat appearing in a violent storm, it will be killed anytime and anywhere. However, this murderous intention was just a hint of Li Anping's leak. It came and went as quickly as it came. The space returned to normal again. Looking at Yan Bei, who was sweating coldly, Li Anping frowned and said, "He already knows about the 8th Research Institute. How much do you know?" Yan Bei said in shock, "This is still unclear. We tried to track his whereabouts, but he was very careful and cunning. All calls were made using disposable mobile phones, and each call did not exceed 10 seconds. Still using voice changer. We are not even sure if the person speaking is Tianhaoan, or if it is his recording. As one of the few people in Daxia who knew the inside story of the 8th Research Institute, Yan Bei knew deeply how terrifying the darkness in the depths of this research institute located underground in the capital was. Once the situation is revealed, it will probably be the biggest scandal in Daxia since the founding of the country. Among the entire Daxia, except for Yan Bei, only Qian Duoduo, Yang Guang, Lu Feng, and a few other people who Li Anping thought could be informed knew part of the information. After all, as the 8th Research Institute becomes larger and larger, and the research content involved becomes deeper and wider, it is impossible not to arrange for people with abilities to protect it. Therefore, Li Anping selected some people from Daxia who he thought he could accept in his heart to assist him in maintaining the work of the 8th Research Institute. The Yan Bei in front of him is one of them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiang Go. Chapter 283. After listening to Yan Bei's words, Li Anping asked again, has he presented any evidence so far? Yan Bei shook his head. No, he naturally knew that what Li Anping was talking about now was the key point. Even if Tianhaoan knew some of the secrets of the 8th Research Institute, ordinary people would not believe him at all. No TV station would dare to reveal this information. If he broke the news online himself, he would probably be caught by Momo at the first time. Even if Tianhaoan broke some of the news, Li Anping believed that Lu Feng's public relations team had enough ability to reverse this unfavorable news. So the key question is whether Tianhaoan has enough and solid evidence, and how much evidence. Will he contact some people that Li Anping absolutely does not want to let know the secrets of the 8th Research Institute? After thinking for a while, Li Anping told Yan Bei, go find Lu Feng and investigate this matter together. Don't let Peter Parker go for the time being. Ask Tianhaoan to tell you how much information he has. I will go to the research institute in person. Lu Feng himself has been managing the intelligence system for many years. He is a person who is used to the darkness of the world. He has almost no resistance to the 8th Research Institute. He is also the person who makes Li Anping most assured in this regard. In addition, he can freely use the intelligence resources of the entire Daxia. He is indeed a good candidate for investigation. Yan Bei nodded and went to the base to find Lu Feng. Li Anping sat in the study again, thinking about the whole thing again, and picked up the phone beside him. 10 minutes later, he walked out of the study. Xiao Suesu was already waiting by the car. When she saw Li Anping coming out, she immediately walked up. He bowed and asked, Sir, where are you going? To the biological company in the suburbs. After that, Li Anping got in the car by himself. He sat in the back seat alone, closed his eyes and rested, and seemed to be indifferent to everything in the outside world. Xiao Suesu followed him and sat in the back seat. The car started. It drove towards the suburbs. The person who could help Li Anping drive was obviously not an ordinary person. The whole car drove as if it was flat, and people could not even feel the difference between starting and stopping. It was like a ghost shuttling in the lane. Obviously, the driver's driving skills have reached the pinnacle. Even if a person is carsick, he will not feel anything when sitting in this car. Li Anping closed his eyes all the way and did not say a word. The driver and Xiao Suesu naturally could not speak. The difference was that Xiao Suesu frowned from time to time and glanced at Li Anping, who closed his eyes and rested. She followed to serve Li Anping today. There was a mission. After receiving the news yesterday, Xiao Anran, the head of the Xiao family, immediately called Xiao Suesu over. At this time, she recalled her conversation with Xiao Anran. A photo was placed in front of Xiao Suesu, and the camera was just the scene of Claudia coming down from the expert. Xiao Suesu flipped through it and looked up at Xiao Anran. Xiao Anran pointed to the photo and said, "This is the latest news we received. Claudia found the master in Xindanjiang and lived with the master for more than 3 months. They may have had a relationship," he scolded. "We are completely behind." Xiao Suesu was not in a hurry, and analyzed calmly, "If we are really completely behind, then Claudia, this Cao Huo, should have been taken to the palace now, but she is still living in the embassy now, right?" She smiled and said, "This shows that she may be a little ahead of us, but she didn't please the master much." Xiao Anran said dissatisfiedly, "But he is an adult now after all, as first woman. Just based on this, Yvonne too and even the entire ice castle can gain a huge advantage. She just got off the plane yesterday. This morning, the 4 nobles of the ice castle have begun to reach an agreement and reconcile. And this first place should have been you." Xiao Suesu said helplessly, "I have tried my best, but the adult's temperament is inherently unpredictable. Needless to say, when you start to accompany the adult tomorrow, you must do your best to find a way to take the relationship between the two further. Do you understand?" Xiao Suesu sighed, "I know." In the car, Xiao Suesu glanced at Li Anping with his eyes closed again, gritted his teeth, and slowly leaned over. Feeling her head resting on Li Anping's shoulder, Xiao Suesu's heartbeat began to accelerate. Of course, she was not embarrassed or shy, but purely because of fear. That feeling was like putting her head next to a tiger's mouth. Although Xiao Suesu knew that Li Anping could not kill her, but for some reason, she just felt scared. Xiao Suesu didn't know. First of all, it was because of the power that Li Anping now held. As the saying goes, to be with the emperor is like being with a tiger. She was not a princess like Claudia who grew up in luxury, so it was normal for her to feel panic. Secondly, because she was a person with special abilities, she could better understand the horror of Li Anping. If Li Anping didn't take the initiative to show his power, ordinary people like Claudia would not be able to feel Li Anping's power at all. At this moment, Li Anping suddenly opened his eyes. Xiao Suesu was like a frightened deer. She immediately retracted her head and looked at Li Anping cautiously and said, "My lord, did I disturb you?" Li Anping looked at him and said, "No." Your heartbeat suddenly became faster. Huh, in Li Anping's ears, Xiao Suesu's heartbeat was like a drum beat, beating faster. He continued, "Are you afraid?" Xiao Suesu said nervously, No, it's just that I'm a little nervous." Li Anping glanced at her and closed his eyes again. "Don't be nervous, you are also my acquaintance, we can talk without being too restrained." Xiao Suesu nodded and said nothing. Then he heard Li Anping continue, "If you don't want to, you can tell me now, I will let them replace you. I promise that no one will trouble you." Xiao Suesu immediately raised her head, with a hint of surprise in her eyes. She didn't expect Li Anping to say that. She immediately said, "My lord, I don't want to leave, I just want to serve you by your side forever." As she said that, she pressed the button on the car, and a partition was raised behind the driver's head, turning the back seat of the car into an enclosed space. Xiao Suesu hugged Li Anping tightly beside her, and pressed her whole body against him. Li Anping could even clearly feel the softness coming from his chest. Xiao Suesu was like a koala, hugging herself tightly and rubbing against him. She buried her head in Li Anping's chest and said softly, "Sir, can I hold you like this when no one is around?" Looking at Xiao Suesu's gentle look, Li Anping couldn't tell whether what this little goblin said was true or false, but it didn't matter to him. If he chose the same woman, he had known Xiao Suesu for a longer time, so it was better than changing another woman and choosing a stranger at random. Although Xiao Suesu didn't get Li Anping's answer, she felt that Li Anping had no intention of pushing her away. She slowly exhaled in her heart and her chest was closer to Li Anping. The location of the 8th Research Institute is on the outskirts of Tianjin. Although Xiao Suesu has accompanied Li Anping many times, she doesn't know what is done here. Every time she comes, she is arranged in a living room. And Li Anping went deep into the underground alone. The electronic door opened, and Shi Wen appeared in front of Li Anping. His hair was like a bird's nest, and his deeply sunken eye sockets showed how tired he was recently. But his eyes were very bright and energetic, and he was obviously in good spirits. When he saw Li Anping appear in front of him, he immediately laughed, "Ha ha ha, I just wanted to notify you to come over. Our cloning plan has made a huge breakthrough. Now the clones with abilities can improve their abilities themselves." Oh, Li Anping didn't expect that Shi Wen's 8th Research Institute could make such a big breakthrough. He looked at the doctor behind Shi Wen and asked, "Is it true?" The doctor nodded. 10 samples have been produced. Although the degree of improvement is different, the limit data of their abilities have indeed improved to varying degrees. Li Anping nodded. He originally wanted to come and check in person to see why the matter of the 8th Research Institute was leaked. But it was such a coincidence that the cloning technology also made a breakthrough at this time, which made him think about the connection between them. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xianglang Guo. Chapter 284. Shi Wen said unhappily, "Don't you believe in our level?" Li Anping's mouth curled up slightly. "No, I just didn't expect you to make a breakthrough so soon." Li Anping was right. Originally, for biological research of this level, a breakthrough would probably take 10 years. Shi Wen chuckled a few times, and suddenly said a little embarrassedly, "In fact, this breakthrough is also related to you. Do you remember the piece of stone that looks like a piece of meat you brought? This time, the breakthrough in cloning technology depends on it." Oh, Li Anping didn't expect that this piece of flesh and blood could play a role in the breakthrough of the cloning foundation. He just instinctively thought it was a good thing. Suddenly, he reacted, "You didn't use that thing up, did you?" "Of course not," Shi Wen said. "We made a breakthrough in cloning technology based on the research of that stone. As for the stone itself, it is indeed a kind of creature, and it is in a state of neither life nor death. We need more time to study it. But it is very dangerous. In the past year, 13 researchers have died in experiments on it. We are now storing it in an environment of -180 degrees. Li Anping waved his hand. "Okay, take me to see the results first." In comparison, he is more concerned about the results of the clones. If it is really very effective, then he now has another way to increase his strength. Although with the transformation of the Hell map, his body is absorbing energy from various air and food almost every moment. With daily practice, he is getting stronger all the time. But this is a very slow process, and it will take about a year to increase by about 1.5. If the average level of the clones can reach level 3, no, as long as they can reach level 2, plus a huge number, it will be of great help to him. Li Anping and his 3 companions walked into a hall, where 10 huge metal cabinets that looked like white coffins were lined up in a row. There were dense lines and pipes everywhere leading to these 10 cabinets. The doctor introduced them as he walked. When they came to the first metal cabinet, he said, "This is the Thunder Emperor Type 3. He was originally just an ordinary 0-level ability user, but in just 2 months, his current power generation has tripled. It is estimated that by the end of next month, he will be able to reach the standard of the first energy level." Li Anping did not speak. He looked at the Qi Luo man curled up in the metal cabinet. He just asked, "How much does it cost?" Shi Wen replied, "Not counting the initial research funds, it cost about 5 million just to cultivate such a sample. However, we are improving the relevant technology. If we want to mass produce in the future, the time and price will be greatly reduced. I am sure that it can be controlled between 2 and 3 times that of ordinary clones." While listening to Shi Wen's answer, Li Anping carefully looked at the entire metal cabinet and the Thunder Emperor Type 3 inside. Countless electric currents, nutrients, nutrient solution, and various substances that Li Anping didn't know were injected into the body of the Thunder Emperor. He could feel the power in the other party's body slowly growing. Although this growth was very small and far less than the growth of ordinary people through exercise, he was doing it 24 hours a day, which was very scary. Li Anping asked, "Can this method only be used for cloned humans?" Shi Wen nodded, "It involves genetic changes, and the embryo must be adjusted before birth. These clones have a metabolic rate far exceeding that of ordinary people since birth, and their lifespan is only about 3 years, which ordinary people cannot use." The doctor on the side said, "The combat capability of Thunder Emperor 3 is not strong, but it is a very good generator. If it is mass-produced for biopower generation, its cost performance is even higher than that of nuclear power plants." Shi Wen hesitated, "This is not good, and using clones to generate electricity will be very troublesome once it is discovered." "What's the trouble? It's just a bunch of proteins that know nothing." The doctor was dismissive of Shi Wen's hesitation. "Sir, if you can approve the large-scale production of Thunder Emperor 3, I can guarantee that within 50 years, the entire Daxia will no longer have to worry about electricity. This will be the best biopower generation technology of this century." Li Anping shook his head. He naturally couldn't agree to the doctor's proposal. Let's not talk about the effect of Thunder Emperor 3 itself. The risk of information leakage after large-scale application is enough to cause trouble. Most people in modern society probably can't treat the clones in front of them as experimental materials like the doctor did. Shi Wen quickly introduced the next material to prevent the doctor from proposing it again. He pointed to the man in the second metal cabinet and said, "This is composite type 2. The original material is Zhou Kang's 4 multiple abilities. This clone perfectly inherits the 4 abilities." Shi Wen on the side interrupted and said, "Composite Type 2 is more suitable for combat than Thunder Emperor Type 3. I tried to add an intelligent chip to his brain. He can basically complete most simple tasks, and he has no self-awareness, no fear and hesitation. He is an excellent source of biochemical soldiers. I have sent people to study the new generation of intelligent chips and add combat skills to them. Once successful, he will be the best humanoid weapon." Li Anping nodded and said nothing. "Now is not the time to use clones on a large scale. But we can try to produce some as a supplement to conventional troops, or as a secret weapon." There were a few more materials left, and Li Anping asked again, "Is there a limit to this growth? What energy level can it reach at most?" Shi Wen thought for a while and said, "According to our calculations, there is no problem in reaching the second energy level." The doctor on the side added, "But you also know, sir, that from the third energy level, the ability is not just a simple increase in strength, but also related to the ability user itself, and there are some strange abilities that we don't know how to improve the level of the clone." Li Anping showed a satisfied look. Being able to reach the second energy level was enough to meet his requirements. He immediately ordered Shi Wen and the doctor to speed up the production of clones. As for the previous low-level clones, production can be temporarily stopped. When talking about this, Li Anping asked, "By the way, Osborn, is he still in the institute?" Osborn is Peter Parker's uncle. At the beginning, he was captured by Scorpion along with many famous scientists. Shi Wen said, "Yes, he is researching a function enhancement factor recently. I heard that he has achieved some success. It can double the strength and speed of ordinary people, but there are some side effects, which are still being modified." Li Anping nodded, asked them to leave, and then called Scorpion. In recent months, it was Scorpion and others who were responsible for the defense of the 8th Research Institute. After Scorpion came up, he stood below with a respectful face, his eyes fixed on his toes, waiting for Li Anping's questions. Since he came back from the field work in the south, he has been working near Tianjin. In recent months, even his skills have regressed a little, and he has gradually reduced his contacts with other combat team members. It is obvious that he intends to stop fighting and develop in the direction of civilian work. Li Enping greeted, "How are you doing recently?" "Thanks to you, the current situation is of course much better than before." Li Enping hummed, and then asked, "I heard that you got married." It happened half a year ago. When he said this, Scorpion, who had always been a sinister image in Li Enping's mind, actually showed a gentle smile, and there was a breath of happiness in his eyes. "The matter is too small, I dare not trouble you to worry about it." Seeing this, Li Enping knew in his heart that the man in front of him was no longer suitable for front-line work, because he already had concerns in his heart. He sighed and suddenly said with some boredom, "You will report the recent situation in the institute to me, and then go to Lusheng tomorrow and hand over to him. You don't have to do the defense work of the 8th Institute in the future. You can choose a civilian job to do it yourself." Scorpion was overjoyed, looking at Li Enping happily, and said, "Thank you, sir." He had long had the tendency to switch to a civilian job, and for this reason he had made a lot of preparations in the past 6 months, read a lot of books, and took many exams. But Li Enping's words were obviously more useful than these things. Then, in Scorpio's cheerful tone, Li Enping began to slowly listen to the other party's report. Li Enping listened and Scorpio talked, basically without any delay. 2 hours later, the latter reported all the past 6 months to Li Enping, especially the points that Li Enping was particularly concerned about. He focused on them. However, Li Enping stopped and didn't find any problems. Even researchers like Osborne who were forcibly kidnapped were cut off from the outside world and were under surveillance. But Li Enping still asked Scorpio to make some arrangements to strengthen the defense of the 8th Institute and deepen the monitoring of researchers like Osborne. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiang Lango. Chapter 285. When Daxia Longke became even busier due to the arrival of Li Enping. On an island in the West Sea, there are beautiful sunshine and sandy beaches everywhere. A man was lying on the beach, sunbathing with a happy face. The man had a shaved head, and his choluo upper body was full of sharp-edged muscles. While he was sunbathing, there was a beautiful woman with wheat-colored skin beside him who was applying sunscreen oil to his body. While enjoying the woman's massage, the man had a smile of enjoyment on his face. His hands rubbed against the woman's body from time to time, causing the woman to dodge repeatedly. While the man was enjoying it, a man who looked like a butler came to him. Even though the sun was shining high, he was still wearing a straight suit, and the glare shone on his face, but he did not show any signs of discomfort. There was no trace of sweat on his expression, or any trace of sweat on his body, as if the scorching sunshine in the sky didn't exist. "Master, today's newspaper." The housekeeper handed a newspaper to the man's hand, and the man spread out the newspaper while lying on his stomach enjoying the massage from the beautiful woman. However, the hijacking on the front page didn't seem to arouse his interest, and the rest of finance, military, and politics were even more dismissive in his eyes. It wasn't until he turned to a piece of news that was more similar to gossip that he stopped and showed an interesting smile. "I saw the title of the news was Secret Travel, Will the Saint Princess Become the Princess of Daxia?" The picture accompanying it is of Claudia getting off the plane. The man laughed, his eyes full of lust. He licked his lips and said, yes, this is Li Enping's girl. I want to bet on this girl," he said. He put one hand on the chest of the woman beside him and said with a smile, "You will be sisters by then. Together with Dong and Xia we can serve this king well together." Although the woman's face showed resentment, she did not make any violent resistance. She just silently endured the harassment given to her by the man. The butler on the side had an expressionless face, as if he was already used to it. The man did not dare to resist when he saw the woman. His hands became more and more unscrupulous and began to pull the woman's clothes, as if he was desperate to start a fight on the beach. The woman closed her eyes as if resigned to her fate, and tears fell from her eyes. The man smiled and wiped away the tears on the woman's cheeks, and said, "Don't cry, don't cry, I will let you know the benefits of being a woman later. Besides, I am the king who is destined by fate, and you are my woman, but it's much better than staying on this island and being a princess." Just as the man was slowly untying the woman's clothes, a cough suddenly sounded behind them, startling the woman, who immediately gathered her clothes and retreated to the side. The man didn't stop him. Instead, he looked behind him with an annoyed look. "I saw a ghost-like figure floating on the beach." From the appearance, it turned out to be Tian Haoan. But at this moment, he was slowly floating in the air, his body was in a translucent state, and he could see the sea behind him directly through his body. The man looked at Tian Haoan. He didn't show any surprise, but said impatiently, "What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you to talk to the Daxialonke people first and wait for my news?" Tian Haoan secretly looked at the disheveled woman, and then said, "I can't delay it much longer." "Aren't you ready yet?" "I'm afraid that if I delay it too long, they will be detrimental to Pete." Unexpectedly, the man opposite showed a violent look on his face, and stretched out his palm directly. Tian Haoan felt that his body was out of control, and the consciousness in his mind was shattered in an instant, and he was even floating in the air now. There are faint signs of collapse in his body. He couldn't see, hear, or think. His mind was blank. When Tian Haoan reacted, his neck was already tightly pinched by the man's right hand. The man's beast-like eyes were only a few inches away from him, and Tian Haoan could see the infinite madness and greed in them. He heard the man say in his ear word by word, "Don't question my decision." And the suddenly clenched right hand seemed to break Tian Haoan's neck, and the huge force brought endless pain to Tian Haoan. "Don't hit my woman's attention. Now, go back and wait for news from me." After saying this, the man's right hand violently broke Tian Haoan's neck. The Tian Haoan in front of him was like a poorly connected TV signal, which directly disintegrated into countless light spots and slowly dissipated in the air. Seeing Tian Haoan disappear, the man clapped his palms in displeasure and cursed, "Damn, you dare to call yourself an avenger like this? They were solved by Daxialonke so quickly. What a bunch of useless trash." In another corner of the eastern continent, in a dilapidated underground hotel, Tian Haoan, who was lying on the bed, suddenly sat up. His head was covered with cold sweat, and his eyes were full of panic. He didn't calm down until he breathed heavily for a minute. It's okay, the body is okay." Thinking of this, Tian Haoan looked at his skinny lower body, his eyes filled with both happiness and resentment. The paralysis of his lower body can be said to be the greatest hatred in his life. But if his lower body wasn't paralyzed, he wouldn't have awakened his ability. This made him feel sad and happy, and he hated Daxialonke and Li Anping even more. As for his ability, it is called the soul leaving the body. This ability can pull one's consciousness out of the body and form an avatar outside the body. He has all kinds of incredible powers, and the most important point is that no matter how many times the soul is killed, his body will not be harmed except for mental fatigue. Thinking about the man who attacked him, Tian Haoan gritted his teeth, and a fierce look appeared in his eyes. He took out a notebook and pen from under the pillow and began to record the feelings of being attacked this time. Today, the man who defeated him with one blow called himself the God King. Since last year, he has approached the Avengers and provided financial and technical assistance behind the scenes in order to help them fight against the Great Xia Dragon Bird. This is normal in the case of the Great Xia ruling the world today. People's desires are endless. After all, not everyone is willing to give up the country in their hands. Even if the other party is Li Anping. The country where the God King is located is a small island country called Dallas located in the West Sea. The area is about the size of a small or medium-sized city. The population is less than 2 million. The Avengers were initially worried that this was a trap set by the great Sea Dragon bird, and they carefully investigated the identity of the man. His real name was Dobuta, the son of a fisherman in Dallas. Before he was 14, he was no different from ordinary Dallas people. He lived a muddled life, and perhaps his whole life would pass by in a daze. But in the summer when he was 14, everything changed. That day, Dobuta was swept away by the wind and waves while playing at the beach. When people thought he was dead, he came back 3 days later and showed unparalleled talent in the days that followed. Dobuta, who was originally at the bottom of the class, only took a few weeks to become the top student in their junior high school. Not only in study, he also showed excellent talent in the field of art. At the age of 15, he wrote 10 songs and sent them to the record company. At the age of 16, he published his first online novel on the internet and earned millions of royalties. Then he directly opened a shipyard in his hometown with the accumulated funds and rented the ships he manufactured to fishermen. It is said that the fishing boats in their shipyard were designed by Dobuta. You should know that one of Dallas' main incomes comes from the fishing industry. The rich fish resources have brought huge income to the shipyard and Dobuta, plus online novels, comics, music, and games. In the year he was promoted to high school, he had become a multi-millionaire. Later, he established a relationship with the senior government officials in Dallas and began to intervene in the government's offshore oil, ocean shipping, national power grid and other businesses. 3 years ago, he had become the richest man in Dallas. The youngest billionaire in the world. But the news about him ended there. When the Avengers wanted to learn more about the intelligence, they found that they could no longer know the other party's situation. After meeting, Tien Hoan found that this man, whose real name was Dobuta, hated his name and called himself the God King, was definitely not simple. The most significant point is that Tien Hoan could not sense the mind energy on him at all, but the other party could always display various strange abilities. Like the move that made him lose consciousness today, it was already the 4th one. Daxia Dragon Bird is an irreconcilable enemy, but this God King is not a kind person either. Tien Hoan summarized the information recorded in his notebook, thinking about the next countermeasures bit by bit, and perfecting his plan. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Seong Lang-go. Chapter 286. In the secret room, a huge searchlight shone on Peter Parker's head, waking him up from his deep sleep. The dazzling light was in sight. Peter Parker looked around and could only see that except for the place illuminated by the searchlight, the rest of the place was pitch black. He didn't know how big the room was or whether there were people around. He moved his body and found that he was fixed to a chair and couldn't get away at all. His chaotic brain gradually reacted, and he remembered that he was caught by the great Sea Dragon bird. Another interrogation? Just as Peter Parker was thinking this, a man's voice came from all directions. "Hello, Peter." With a sneer, Peter replied, "Don't waste your time. All my team members are dead. What else do you want to know?" "Tien Hoan, he should be one of you, right?" Peter shook his head. "He quit a long time ago. I don't know where he went." "I think we shouldn't go around in circles." The next moment, a voice came into Peter's ears. "Pete." The voice was cut off halfway through, but these 2 short words made Pete completely excited. He was like a trapped beast, the muscles of his limbs suddenly swelled up, and the surging mind burst out. "Uncle," he stared with bloodshot eyes and said word by word, "what did you do to him?" "Don't be nervous, he is doing well now, but I can't guarantee what will happen next." Pete Parker gritted his teeth and kept exerting his muscles. He wanted to break free from the restraints on his body. However, more than 20 alloy steel bars were buckled on his limbs and torso, and even the entire chair was fixed to the ground. until bloodshot appeared on his body. There was no sign of breaking free. I really don't know about Tianhaoyan. He quit the Avengers last year. After a moment of silence, the male voice said again, do you think it's meaningful for you to persist? The Avengers have been completely annihilated. In order to shelter a fugitive, you plan to sacrifice your relatives? As long as you tell us Tianhaoyan's ability and whereabouts, we will release your uncle. We promise to let him live like an ordinary person and no one will disturb him. Peter Parker frowned tightly, and the muscles on his body twisted like little snakes. Just when he was full of contradictions, a scream came into his ears. It sounded like Osborn's voice. Instantly, the alloy steel bars on Peter Parker's body made a creaking sound, as if he would be broken at any time and anywhere. His forehead was even more blue. His bloodshot eyes stared at the direction of the searchlight. Stop it! Don't hurt him! Seemingly happy to see Peter Parker's anxious look, the voice music laughed and said, don't worry, it's just a broken little finger. If you are willing to cooperate, we can reattach it now. Peter Parker's clenched teeth made a clicking sound, and his clenched fist dripped a trace of blood. It can be seen how excited and conflicted he is now. Li Enping, Daxia Longke, I will never let you go. But reality will not change with his imagination. The man said impatiently, your uncle seems to have fainted from the pain. If you don't make a decision, we have to wake him up. Peter Parker trembled all over. If the anger and hatred in his heart could be materialized, it would be enough to ignite the entire city. He closed his eyes in pain, and the scenes of the past few years appeared in his mind again. Uncle's voice, smile, and the scenes of him raising me. Scenes of the Avengers dying one by one. Daxia's dictatorship. The past scenes quickly alternated in Peter Parker's mind. Finally, his body suddenly relaxed. He opened his eyes and revealed a hint of understanding. I have been fighting for so long, and it is not just for myself. I'm sorry, Uncle. Just then, the man's voice sounded again, have you thought about it? Your uncle has lost a lot of blood. Peter Parker smiled bitterly and said slowly, go back and tell Li Enping that his power can't scare everyone. Not everyone will succumb to fear. Let him and his ideal country go to hell. We don't need him to help us arrange our lives. After saying this, Peter Parker felt extremely happy in his heart. He felt that at this moment, he was sublimated and became a hero fighting for freedom and democracy. But this feeling did not last long. The next moment, the surroundings returned to darkness. Before Peter Parker could adapt, he felt that his neck seemed to be stabbed by something and fell into a coma again. Outside the secret room, Zhou and Yanbei looked at the display screen, which showed Peter Parker being carried out. Twisting his body uneasily, Zhou reported to Li Enping behind him, Sir, how about letting Osborn go and persuade him in person? It's useless. Yanbei looked at Peter Parker in the camera coldly, just now he has made it clear that he would rather sacrifice his uncle than betray his teammates. If Osborn is allowed to persuade him, he will be even more uncooperative after he knows that Osborn has surrendered to us. Zhou thought for a while and said, maybe he saw through it? Or we can let Osborn record a more miserable video for him to watch. I don't think so. He is so mentally tough that even the masters of the Wang family can't hypnotize him. Now he has made up his mind. I'm afraid even if Osborn dies in front of him, he can't change his mind. Zhou curled his lips, what a lunatic, just like a fanatic. Okay, Li Enping interrupted the conversation between the two, and he ordered, don't worry about him, prepare plan B. The two obviously had no objection to Li Enping's decision, and bowed and retreated at the same time. After the two left, Li Enping took out his mobile phone and looked at it. He received another anonymous email a few minutes ago. After Li Enping opened it, he could see 5 photos. There were more than 20 clone bodies placed together in a row. There were backgrounds of both the 8th Institute and other unknown areas. Li Enping had received a similar anonymous email this morning. This is also the reason why he came to watch the interrogation process of Peter Parker. Not wanting Momo to know about this, Li Enping asked Lu Feng to find a group of technicians to track the source of the email. But to no avail, the other party's technology in this area is higher than theirs. The phone rang, it was Lu Feng's voice. "Sir, new emails have been found." "How is it?" "It's an internet cafe in Lily City, and someone has been sent over." Li Enping nodded and hung up the phone. Although someone has been sent over, he didn't have any expectations. Outside an internet cafe in Lily City, 6 black shadows were like sharp swords, rushing over at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye in a few seconds. They were agile and restrained, like ghosts in the night. What's more special is that they all exude more or less mind energy. These 6 people are all capable people. No one at the front door. No one in the hall. No one at the back door. Nothing in the basement. Voices spread through the air through the radio, but the news received made the captain in charge of the operation feel something was wrong. "Ziobai, do some detection." "Understood." After saying this, a female ability user opened her mouth, and ultrasonic waves that were difficult for human ears to hear came out of her mouth, and in a blink of an eye, they covered the entire building where the internet cafe was located. But the result she got made her extremely confused. "Captain, there is no one. No, there is something on the ceiling of the building." A loud bang completely drowned her voice, and the entire internet cafe had turned into a sea of fire. 5 minutes later, Li Enping received a call from Lu Feng. His face became more gloomy. After a cold smile, he made a call and slowly said, "Formally launch Plan B." Half an hour later, on a giant passenger plane, the man who called himself the God King looked at the screen and showed a satisfied smile. He stretched his hand to the side, and without saying anything, the butler had already handed him red wine. After taking a sip, he couldn't help but laugh. It worked. The network system of Daxia is simply a pile of rubbish. Red Queen took action personally, and they couldn't even find our trace. Shaking the wine glass in his hand, he couldn't help but feel proud in his heart. "What Li Enping, what Queen, a bunch of country bumpkins, it won't be long before you all kneel down and lick my solace like dogs." Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 287. When Peter Parker woke up again, it was still dark in front of him. No, it should be that his eyes were covered. After struggling a little, Peter Parker felt that his hands and feet seemed to be tied. And the space he was in seemed to be bumping all the time. Am I in a car? But before Peter Parker could think about it, a fist had hit his stomach. 2 men on the left and right grabbed his arms. Be honest. Don't move. Peter Parker did not resist. In this unknown situation, he could not choose to act rashly. Are you awake? A man's voice came from in front of Peter. We are going to let you go now, so you'd better not do anything stupid. This sentence made Peter feel doubtful. However, the shackles on his hands and feet, the guards on the left and right, and the unknown defense force prevented Peter from acting rashly. In the next few hours, Peter felt as if he was being transported to and fro, walking, driving, and boating, changing transportation again and again. At first, Pete wanted to judge where he was by listening and feeling, but the destination kept changing, so he soon gave up the idea. As the itinerary kept changing, the patience of the man opposite Pete seemed to be getting worse and worse. What? Changed again? Is he playing tricks on us? The man said angrily. After a few more words, several people took Pete to the car and headed in other directions again. Until now, Pete has not said a word. He is still a little confused about the situation in front of him. He suspected that this was Daxia Longke acting in front of him, and he also suspected that it was really Tian Hoan who came to save him. Another half an hour later, Pete got out of the car, and this time he was taken to the plane. When the plane took off and felt the gravity dragging his body down, Pete Parker realized that he was on the plane. He asked tentatively, "Are we going abroad?" The guard beside him hit his soft abdomen with his elbow. Pete coughed a few times and laughed softly, "Did you not eat?" The guard was angry and was about to beat him again, but was stopped by the people beside him. "Sorry. We are forbidden to talk to you. Don't waste your time." Then Pete said a few more words, but no one answered him. He simply closed his eyes and rested, and took a break to recover his energy and physical strength. During this period, he was either sleeping or being arrested for interrogation. Both his mental and physical state were at a low point. No matter what was going to happen in a while. Obviously, a good rest would help. I don't know how long it took. Pete felt that he was shaken awake, and a group of people seemed to tie something to his body. Then his eyes lit up, and the black cloth covering his eyes had been taken off. The dazzling light made him unable to see the surrounding situation clearly for a while. After a few seconds, Pete, who gradually adapted to the light, began to look around. When he saw the surrounding situation, my heart couldn't help but sink. There were 5 dragon bird guards and 15 soldiers, all fully armed and looking at him. 2 of them were helping him put on something behind him. A man in the uniform of the dragon bird of Daxia looked at his watch and urged, "Are you ready? How long will it take?" The 2 soldiers patted Peter Parker on the back. They saluted the man, "Okay, sir." Peter Parker looked at the man coldly, "Zomai. What are you going to do to me?" It turned out that the person who escorted him all the way was Zomai, a 4th-level ability user of the Dragon Bird of Daxia. Peter Parker knew this Dragon Bird guard who often arrested militants, criminals, and traitors in southern Xinjiang. He even had fights with many parties. Zomai did not answer Peter Parker's question, but smiled and showed a sly smile to the other party. "It's time, let him go." The interior of the plane where Peter Parker was not big, and there was obvious metal material all around. At first glance, it was some kind of military transport plane. When Zomai finished speaking, 2 soldiers had already escorted him to the door of the plane. Then, they opened the door and saw an endless desert in front of him. The strong wind rushed in, blowing Peter Parker's hairstyle into a mess, but he didn't have time to care about it. He felt something was wrong. "What do you want to do?" No one answered him. A huge force came from behind him, and Peter Parker was kicked out of the door. At this moment, Peter Parker felt that his heart seemed to slow down by half a beat. The desert under his feet was rapidly enlarged in his eyes. As the speed of descent became faster and faster, the wind blew on his face one after another, making him close his eyes. The heat wave on the ground rushed in his face, and his hands and feet were all tied up by alloy shackles. No matter how he twisted, he could not break free. Just when Peter Parker thought he was going to be smashed into a meat pie, there was a sound behind him, and a parachute had opened from behind him, and the air resistance began to reduce his landing speed. Peter Parker remembered the actions of the 2 soldiers just now. "So that's it, are they helping me load the parachute?" I saw a dark green parachute in the sky slowly drifting towards the ground. Under the parachute, Peter Parker was sweating as he looked at the desert below. He was already sweating before he landed. Just as he was thinking about what all this was about, in the desert in the distance, a burst of sand and dust was coming towards the location where he fell. It seemed that something was moving at high speed, rolling up countless amounts of sand, forming a moving line of dust. 5 minutes later, when Peter Parker landed on a sand dune, the streak of dust had already arrived in front of him. A gust of hot wind and sand blew across his face. When the sand and dust cleared, under Peter Parker's alert eyes, a middle-aged man in a tuxedo slowly walked towards him. The desert, the tuxedo, no matter how you look at it, it seems strange. What's even weirder is that the man was clearly running all the way, kicking up sand and dust at a fast speed, but in Peter Parker's eyes, he was wearing a tuxedo for such a strenuous exercise. Not even a little sweat. Seemingly not seeing Peter Parker's alert eyes, the butler-like figure walked up to Peter Parker and said politely, "Hello, sir, you can call me Nord, and I will take you out of here. Please don't resist." The man who called himself Nord spoke in a very cold tone, especially his tone, which was like a straight line from beginning to end, without any ups and downs. While saying these words, Nord didn't stop. He pressed his hands on the alloy shackles. Under Peter Parker's surprised gaze, he gently tore the shackles apart, and then the shackles on his feet. Of shackles. Peter Parker rubbed his finally freed wrist and stood up slowly. He looked at Neo and said, "Who sent you?" Nord didn't speak, but pressed a finger on Peter Parker's forehead. The speed was so fast that he didn't react at all, and then a strange force swept through his whole body. Peter Parker's clothes, backpack, and several bolts of lightning erupted from his left arm. Seeing Peter Parker's surprised look, Nord explained coldly, "It's just an ordinary EMP, to destroy the surveillance device on you." Touching his left arm, Peter Parker felt a stinging pain. "They also put a tracker in my arm." Nord nodded, "It seems so, but you don't have to worry, the medical equipment in the base will treat your arm." "Base? Is it right here?" Nord shook his head, "You will know later." Under Peter Parker's suspicious eyes, the two waited for about 10 seconds. Under the strong sunlight, Peter Parker felt that his mouth was dry, his whole body was hot, and his mind seemed to be confused. "How long are we going to wait here?" Seeing that Nord didn't speak, Peter Parker was helpless. The man in front of him is his only way out at the moment. Surrounded by endless desert, he was alone without supplies and was desperate. Just as Peter Parker was getting more and more anxious, a shattering sound suddenly came from his ears, which was that the space was being torn apart. A hole like a whirlpool appeared directly in front of the two people, and it continued to expand until the hole expanded to the size of a person, and then stopped. Looking at the blue-white vortex in front of him in surprise, Nord said lightly, "Please come in, sir." Daxia Lonke's command room. A group of people were walking around busily. The huge screen showed the desert where Peter Parker was now. In the middle of the desert, a small green dot flashed, which was obviously Peter Parker's location. All around him were blue dots representing Daxia. The target has reached the expected location. Every unit is in its place. The signal source of the tracker has disappeared, and the other party has anti-detection means. As the green dots on the display disappeared, the people in the command room became busy, and the surrounding blue dots were seen quickly moving towards Peter Parker's previous position. Target disappears. No signal found. We lost track of him. The troops started searching on the spot. Bring up the satellite video. In the last row of the command room, Yanbei looked at the panicked crowd in front of him and said to Li Anping next to him, "Sir, is this okay?" Li Anping shook his head, with a mysterious smile on his face. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiang Lango. Chapter 288. Dazzling white light, upside-down dizziness, and a confused sense of space. When everything returned to normal, when Peter Parker opened his eyes, he saw a huge square in front of him, and there was no trace of the desert. Above Peter Parker's head was a golden and blue aircraft. The surface of the aircraft was inlaid with huge blue crystals that emitted bursts of blue light. Coupled with the streamlined and mysterious fuselage, the entire aircraft looked like a spaceship. Such a high-tech spaceship stopped above his head, and Peter Parker was a little overwhelmed for a while. Subconsciously, he felt that the white vortex that had just opened seemed to be related to the spaceship above his head. At this moment, Nord also walked out of the white vortex. With his appearance, the white vortex slowly became smaller and finally dissipated in the air, making people unable to help but doubt that everything before was just an illusion. "Sir, please follow me." With Nord's call, Peter Parker reluctantly retracted his gaze and followed behind him, walking towards a small house in the distance. During this period, Peter Parker carefully observed the surrounding environment and found that the position of the sun seemed to be different from that in the desert. It seemed that the white vortex just now was indeed some kind of transmission technology, but he was not sure whether it was technology or ability. He was now in a huge square, with nothing around him except the gray concrete ground, and only the small spaceship that had just landed above his head. At this time, it was also flying in the opposite direction of them, and the blue tail flame was ejected from the tail of the spaceship. In the blink of an eye, the spaceship had become a small black dot in Peter Parker's eyes. At this time, Nord also stopped. In front of them was a small house the size of a telephone booth. When Nord stopped in front of the door of the small house, a blue light swept across Nord's head horizontally. The next moment, the door of the small house opened automatically inward, and an underground passage appeared in front of Peter Parker. Nord walked in without hesitation. But Peter Parker hesitated. Looking at the desolate scene in the square, he finally entered the underground passage. Nord walked in front of him, and Peter Parker followed him all the way. Walking down the road, he felt that the underground here was like an ant nest with many connections, going left and right, up and down. At first, he still wanted to remember the route he had taken. But as the forks became more and more, and the structure of the passage became more and more complicated, Peter Parker soon gave up. Is it so complicated to build it to deal with invasions? On the contrary, Nord did not hesitate at all when walking, as if he had memorized the entire route. Every step was crisp and neat, and it seemed that he didn't even need to think. Speaking of steps, Peter Parker found something strange. So far, the other party seemed to have no change in the rhythm of walking. Even the distance between each step was kept consistent. This person's self-discipline, I'm afraid it's already at the inhuman level. Along the way, in addition to Nord, Peter Parker also saw some other people. Although each of them was dressed differently, they had the same characteristic, that is, they all had no expression on their faces. Even if they saw Nord, they didn't say hello. They all came and went in a hurry and quickly disappeared from Peter Parker's eyes. To Peter Parker, they seemed to be a bit similar to Nord. However, no matter how long the road is, there will always be an end. When Peter Parker followed Nord around two corners again, a door appeared in his eyes. Two men in suits and cold faces stood outside the door. Nord led Peter Parker forward. Just when Peter Parker thought they would say a few words, Nord just looked at each other and pushed the door open and walked in. When Peter Parker followed him in, he found that the two men had no expression on their faces, looked straight ahead, and didn't even look at him. Compared with the architectural layout here, these two guards seem too lax, or is Nord's status here enough to bring people in casually? While thinking, Peter Parker had already crossed the door, and saw countless display screens and electronic instruments appear in front of him. Below the display screen stood a foreign woman with blonde hair and blue eyes and a plump figure. The woman glanced at Peter Parker, but said nothing, just ordered, "Test his blood and confirm his identity, Red Queen, contact the young master." A little girl's voice came from the direction of the display screen, "Connecting, the network is abnormal, please wait a moment." The woman frowned, but didn't say much. And Nord took out a pistol-shaped syringe from his arms and said to Peter Parker, "Sir, we need to test your blood to confirm your identity, please don't resist." As he said, he pointed the syringe in his hand at Peter Parker's neck. The latter only felt a slight sting, and Nord left with the syringe. Only Peter Parker and the blonde woman were left in the room. After a while of silence, the blonde woman just kept looking at the screen, and Peter Parker also looked at it and found that it was full of various special terms and numbers, and he didn't know what they meant. He thought about it and asked tentatively, Hello, may I ask which side you are from? Why do you want to save me? The woman glanced at him, but did not continue to remain silent. She just turned her back to Peter Parker and said casually, Peter, you are a talent, but the Avengers you formed are too childish. The strength is too weak. That's why the young master will provide money for you, hoping that you can cause some trouble to Daxia. Now it seems that this is a failed investment. Peter Parker glanced at the blonde woman in confusion and asked, You are the one who is funding us behind the scenes. Who are you? The blonde woman sneered, Tien Howen didn't tell you the young master's information? Forget it, all you need to know now is that, considering that there is still some potential, the young master plans to accept you as his subordinate, so you can feel at ease in the future. Just keep your heart to the young master and don't have any more evil thoughts. The woman looked arrogant and spoke even more arrogantly, as if she had done Peter Parker a great favor, which was indeed very unpleasant. Peter Parker suppressed the discomfort in his heart and asked again, I wonder who the young master you are talking about is. How do I know if you are Daxia Lonke pretending to be someone who wants to take information out of my mouth? Hearing Peter Parker say these words, the disdainful expression on the woman's face became even more intense, as if she was laughing at Peter Parker's ignorance. She snorted a few times before saying proudly, We need to pretend to be Daxia Longbird? Huh, I'm too lazy to explain it to you. All in all, you'll know after working under the young master for a while. The young master is the one destined by fate. His talents are beyond the imagination of a third-rate guy like you. Not to mention you, even Li Anping of Daxia Dragonbird or the Star Alliance Queen, those 5th-level ability users in the Western continent will sooner or later be surpassed by the young master. As long as you keep working hard, you will naturally flourish in the future. Just as the woman was telling these words, a flash suddenly flashed on the big screen, and a young man with a shaved head appeared in front of them. When he saw the blonde woman in front of him, he immediately laughed, Kristen, how are you? Did Daxia keep his promise and receive Peter Parker? Seeing the God King appear on the screen, the blonde woman's eyes immediately lit up. She looked at the screen with a smile on her face and said, Sir, we have received Peter Parker. How are you doing? Is Tyrell's business going well? As she spoke, she lifted her chest and twisted her waist, as if she wanted to show off her good figure. Unexpectedly, there was a trace of doubt in the eyes of the God King. Did you receive it? He looked down, as if he was checking something, and then asked, No, the task was not completed. Where is he? The blonde woman's eyes were stunned, and she turned to look at Peter Parker. He is right here, the man behind me. At this moment, the door suddenly opened, and Nord rushed in with more than 10 strong men in black and surrounded Peter Parker. Nord himself stood in front of Christine. Kristen asked, What's going on? Nord looked at Peter Parker coldly and said, Miss Christine, according to DNA comparison, the person in front of you is not Peter Parker. He is a fake. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Lango. Chapter 289. Kristen stared at Peter Parker coldly. You're not Peter Parker? Who on earth are you? Seeing that he was exposed, Lu Feng laughed and his face changed, turning into his original appearance. He didn't expect that the other party would be able to verify his identity so quickly, and that the DNA testing would be so fast. However, after he returned to his original appearance, he was not nervous at all. He looked directly past Christine and looked at the God King on the screen. My friend, are you the leader here? I don't know who is behind you. Are these forces going to have trouble with our Daxia Dragon Bird? Behind, the God King chuckled. Who can do what's behind my back? He looked at Lu Feng and said slowly, Are you Lu Feng? The person in charge of the Daxia intelligence department, the ability is quite good. But your combat power is too weak. Once exposed, you will be meat on the chopping block. I'll give you two options now. The first is to be my subordinate and go undercover for me to rescue Peter Parker. The second is to wait until I dissect you and turn you into an experimental material. After saying that, he looked at Lu Feng with a smile, as if he was confident and not worried at all about what trump card the other party had. Isn't there any instructions from behind? I don't know if it's true or not. After thinking about it, Lu Feng tried again. The current leader of Daxia is Li Enping, and I don't want to be his enemy, and I don't think there is anyone else in the world who can be his opponent. Hearing Lu Feng's answer, the God King laughed first, and Christine on the side also laughed so hard that it seemed that what Lu Feng just said was so funny. Until Lu Feng frowned. The God King stopped laughing wildly and pointed at Lu Feng on the other side of the screen. He said with disdain, "The frog in the well." Before Lu Feng could refute, the God King continued, "You can regard Li Enping as invincible only because you have too little experience. If he can explode stars with one punch and physically travel across the universe, then that's still something to behold. As for now," the God King shook his head, "if your only concern is Li Enping, then there is no need. Moreover, he can't protect himself now. The three powerful countries in the Western continent have designed many plans to deal with him. Maybe he won't survive more than 3 or 4 years." Lu Feng shook his head and said, "You are talking nonsense. Who can't tell me? You want to convince me in just a few words, but that's impossible. It's better to come up with some evidence." The God King looked at Lu Feng with a sarcastic face. "Persuade you? Is it necessary? I will give you one last chance, join me or die." In line with the words of the God King, the guards headed by Nord raised their right arms at the same time and pointed at Lu Feng's position. Their arms changed and revealed a trace of metallic luster. All of them turned into a small metal barrel, and a blue halo emerged from the barrel. It seemed that as soon as Lu Feng said no, they would fire together and kill Lu Feng on the spot. Seeing this change, Lu Feng's pupils also shrank. The skills displayed by the other party once again exceeded his imagination. A robotic arm, particle cannon, or laser, or is it just an ordinary artillery piece? Lu Feng's face became a little solemn, as if he was facing an unknown ability user, and the weapons displayed by the other party were things he had never seen before. Christine saw Lu Feng's hesitation. He persuaded again, "Okay Lu Feng, Li Enping, and Daxia. They are just country bumpkins. If you follow them, the most you can do is hang out on this road. It's rare that the young master wants to take you in now. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The young master can give you strength and lifespan. Why are you hesitating? It's better than dying now, right? This kind of persuasion is too careless. They just persuaded me casually. It seems that they have the idea that if it works, it doesn't matter." Lu Feng didn't speak, his face was solemn, and thoughts flashed through his mind. "Do you want to be conceited first, or should I say, that's the end of it?" Just when Lu Feng hesitated, the God King shook his head, "If you are stubborn, kill him." Seeing a dozen cannon muzzles emitting blue light, Lu Feng quickly shouted, "Wait." The God King curled his lips. "What? You figured it out? But I think dead people are more obedient. After killing you and transforming you into a biochemical person, it will be much easier to use." No longer giving Lu Feng a chance to defend himself, the next moment, a blue light ball lit up at the muzzle, aiming at Lu Feng's limbs respectively. It seemed that he wanted to cripple his mobility and then capture him alive. According to what the God King said, transform into a biochemical human. But at this critical moment, a black figure sprang out from Lu Feng's chest. The next second, all the men, including Nord, flew up into the sky, and a terrifying loud noise sounded in their chests at the same time. Blue light bullets were shot out randomly from the muzzle of their right hand, causing the whole room to be filled with lightning and sparks. And Nord and the others, who were blasted out in an instant, were in mid-air, and their entire chests had exploded. The metal skeletons, the sparks sputtering out, and the chest cavities of these men are completely made of metal without any flesh and blood. They are all robots. But even for robots, the terrifying force spread from their chests to the ends of their limbs, as if they were run over by a train. All the robots exploded into various metal fragments and scattered all over the ground. They could not be found on the ground at all. Any intact part anymore. In Christine's surprised eyes, she only felt a flash in front of her eyes, and Nord and the others had turned into pieces on the ground. The wind swept through the whole room, and the terrible sonic boom kept echoing in her mind, making her a little unsteady. At the same time, a man with a black aura all over his body stood in front of Lu Feng. Lu Feng, who had never surrendered to the God King before, was now standing behind Lu Feng with his head down and a respectful face. Christine looked at the other party in doubt and asked, "Who are you?" She was obviously a capable person, so she could see the existence of the incarnation of mind energy. The sound of air vibration came from the mouth of the incarnation of mind energy. "I am the country bumpkin in your mouth." The next moment, a black wild shadow swept across, and all kinds of laser launchers, automatic machine guns, and flamethrower weapons that had just lit up in the room were smashed into garbage by Li Anping. "Stop," Christine screamed, "if you kill me, the young master will not let you go." The incarnation of mind energy moved too fast, and Christine couldn't see it at all. Seeing the sparks and explosions around him, he thought the other party was going to kill her. At the same time, the door of the room was opened automatically, and hundreds of robots rushed in from outside. This was only the part that could be seen due to the limited angle of the room. The part that Li Anping could not see was boundless. Thousands of robots, like ants, rushed from all directions of the underground base, and their target was Li Anping, the invader. Facing the robot army that was surging like a tide, Li Anping flashed and appeared in front of Lu Feng. He stood in a horse stance, lowered his shoulders and elbows, and a standard right straight punch was already blasted towards the passage in front of him. How strong is the incarnation of mind energy at this time? Li Anping's body quality is strength 37.8, speed 38.2, and physical fitness 38.7, while what about the incarnation of mind energy? His strength is 39.8, physical fitness is 39.9, and as for speed, it has broken through to an unprecedented 40.1. Don't look at the current value difference of only a single digit. When it comes to Li Anping's current value, every 0.1 is a huge gap. A punch was thrown, and the so-called aerodynamics became a joke, because at this moment, in front of this punch, all the vibrating air molecules became motionless. Countless molecules were hit by this terrible force, and there was no time to dodge and make a passage. They mixed with the fist and exploded forward. The particles in the air that were bombarded by this punch exploded one after another, turning into rays. The storm of particles was centered on Li Anping's fist, expanding in all directions like a bubble. The high-speed scattered particles directly hit the surrounding air molecules, tearing the molecules apart and stripping the electrons. It was no longer an explosion, nor was it the transmission of power in the air. This was a punch that completely surpassed the empty palm, with pure power, creating the same effect as a plasma cloud. Li Anping named this punch the molecular explosion punch. The collision between molecules emitted terrible energy, scorching high temperature, various rays and particles that permeated the air, tearing everything in front of him. The metal wall turned into countless iron, carbon, titanium, and other elements in the first microsecond, and hundreds of robots were directly blasted into powder in the second microsecond. If you look from the sky, you can see a huge ball of light gradually emerging from the ground, and the light as bright as the sun shot out from the ground, as if a sun was about to rise from the ground. After a few seconds, the light gradually dissipated, and the shock wave flattened everything on the ground, directly sweeping the area about 2 kilometers nearby. When the sun underground completely disappeared, only a large hole hundreds of meters deep and hundreds of meters wide was left. On the fighter, Li Anping, who was sitting in the back row, was looking at a newspaper in his hand. When the incarnation of the mind energy punched out, his head suddenly raised up, and his eyebrows couldn't help but frowned. Damn it! Unexpectedly, the incarnation of the mind energy was strengthened too much. Li Anping, who was used to the power of the original body, found something wrong after punching out. He used too much force. This not only destroyed the opponent's base, but also destroyed many clues and information, especially the high-tech displayed by the opponent. This was something Li Anping was determined to get, but now he can only see how much is left. But fortunately, the so-called God King does not seem to be in the base, and there will be a chance to catch him in the future. But next time, punch a little lighter. No, for the sake of safety, it is better not to punch if it is a mind incarnation. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang Go. Chapter 290. Thick smoke came out from the huge hole. The base of the God King was directly destroyed by the punch of the incarnation of the mind. Only a huge cave and a large number of broken weapons, robots, and other debris were left. At the edge of the pit, a red and yellow metal arm stretched out, followed by another arm. I saw a person wrapped in steel armor climbing up the edge. The entire armor was red and yellow, and there was a bright blue light spot on the chest of the armor. Lying on the ground, the armored man was gasping for breath. The energy is about to run out. The power source is damaged by 92%. The armor is damaged by 78%. A series of bad news appeared in the helmet, and the figure opened the helmet, revealing a charming and beautiful face. It was Christine who threatened Lu Feng just now. At this moment, she was wrapped in a steel battlesuit, but her pretty face was pale, and her golden hair was stuck together, but she was not in the mood to care so much. She climbed to the edge of the pit and looked at the scene in front of her with disbelief. After 2 years of operation, trillions of funds were invested, and the young master's countless efforts. At this moment, this base has become a complete ruin. How can Christine accept this? But just when Christine was pale and collapsed, the incarnation of mind energy had already grabbed Lu Feng and appeared behind him. Christine also remembered that she was far from being out of danger. Turning her head, the monster with black air all over his body and a punch that destroyed the entire base. Standing with Lu Feng, looking at her with ill intentions. "You, what are you going to do?" Christine stood up with a panicked look on her face. She activated the iron suit on her body, but except for a few sparks behind her, she couldn't fly. Damn, the explosion just now, the damage to the iron suit is too high. Li Anping didn't care about Christine's question. His eyes looked at the iron suit worn by the other party and the technical content of this thing. Just by looking at it, you can tell that it is very high, at least the technology of Daxia Longke is high. Li Anping had seen similar things in Emerald City, such as Violet's cyborg and the Doom Slayer he killed later. Li Anping is still very interested in these high-tech products. It's just that Daxia's research in this area is still very basic and has not achieved much. But this time, it seems that this so-called God King can gain something. Seeing that Li Anping didn't speak, Christine swallowed her saliva. She asked, "What else do you want?" This base cost the young master a lot of effort, so it's fair, right? If you still want to harm me, the young master will not let you go. We have a lot of evidence of the 8th Research Institute, and you don't want the whole world to know those things, right? Originally, Li Anping was very curious about how the other party knew about the 8th Research Institute, but now it seems that some of the other party's technologies, especially in the field of robots, it is indeed far superior to Daxia Longke, so it is expected that these things can be investigated. Hearing Christine's words, Li Anping shook his head. I have never been threatened by anyone. I will ask you a question. You answer and tell me where the God King is. I can give you a quick death. Christine shook her head desperately. You don't know how terrifying the young master is. Li Anping, don't look at how strong you are now. This base is just a branch base of the young master. If the young master is really angry, you and Daxia can't bear it. I am his woman. If he knows that you are not good for me, he will definitely retaliate against you desperately. Christine obviously gave up resistance completely, because she knew that she was obviously not the opponent of the monster in front of her. But she did not surrender, but kept threatening the other party with words not to mess around. Faced with what Christine said, Li Anping just shrugged. Childish threat. After saying this, he flicked a finger at Christine. The terrible force disturbed the air in an instant. Although under Li Anping's intentional control, the incarnation of mind energy only flicked his fingers lightly, the air was still torn apart in an instant, and a white sword energy wave shot out directly from Li Anping's fingers. The ground was cut open with a gap of dozens of meters. Christine didn't even have time to react. The white sword energy wave had already passed over her body and flew hundreds of meters away. Then, a rustling sound rang in Christine's ears. She turned her head blankly and saw that her right arm wrapped in the iron battle suit had fallen to the ground. The rustling sound was the sound of blood spilling from the wound. The pain was transmitted from the wound on the shoulder to the brain in time. Li Anping murmured, "The iron lump on your body can't protect you. As for your young master, I hope she sees the scene and rushes over to trouble me." The severe pain instantly overwhelmed Christine's brain, and she fell to the ground and screamed wildly. He began to curse Li Anping, "You lunatic! I'm going to kill you! I'm going to kill you! The young master won't let you go. And Daxia, he will turn the whole Daxia into a sea of fire. You're dead. Li Anping, you're dead." Li Anping smiled disdainfully, tapped his chin towards Lu Feng, and motioned to him to help Christine stop the bleeding, so that he wouldn't die accidentally. He still has many questions to ask the other party. In the sky, a blue and gold fighter jet cut through the sky at an astonishing high speed, with a long blue tail flame trailing behind it as it flew towards the God King's base. On the seat of the plane, the God King was driving the plane anxiously. "Asshole, Li Anping, if you dare to touch Kristen, I will bury your whole family with you." The face of the God King was completely twisted and ferocious. In his mind, it doesn't matter even if the base is destroyed, but once his woman is taken advantage of, even if the other party's entire family dies, it won't be enough to compensate. Ever since the accident at the age of 14, had he ever suffered such a big loss? Damn it, the energy of the arbiter in the base has not been restored yet, otherwise he could just tear apart the space and teleport the troops there. The Phoenix fighter is still too slow. At this moment, a translucent screen appeared in front of the God King in the driver's seat. It was the picture seen from above the base. This was a shot taken by a satellite. What is going on? The God King looked at the scene from the camera in disbelief. The entire base had turned into a big black pit, and bursts of thick smoke kept coming out of it. In fact, the God King has been unable to contact the base since just now, but he never expected that the place would become like this. Damn it, is it Li Anping? But the entire base is made of super alloy, and even he can't cause this level of damage casually. Was some kind of weapon used? Plasma cannon? Nuclear bomb? Or a graviton cannon? Various thoughts flashed through his mind, and the God King was unwilling to believe that the sub-base into which he had put so much effort was destroyed by Li Anping in an instant. In fact, the previous God King had always observed the situation in the room through the base's camera. Through the camera, he couldn't see the substance of Nian Qi at all, and he couldn't see the incarnation of Li Anping's Nian Qi. In his eyes, the robot suddenly broke into pieces, and then the whole room exploded, and then contact was lost. However, he clearly received the sound produced by the vibration of the air, so he knew that it might be Li Anping coming. So he suspected that Li Anping used some kind of powerful weapon to cause the destruction of the entire sub-base. After all, Li Anping himself has never caused similar damaging effects in public. And the nuclear fusion he performed in Dongyang is generally considered to be the hydrogen bomb carried by Emma. The God King's guess at this time was also very reasonable to him. However, the God King still stopped the Phoenix fighter in his hand. He hesitated for a long time, and finally turned around and drove back. Go back first. If Christine falls into their hands, I will take action. A trace of evil flashed in the God King's eyes. Now that I have evidence in my hand, Li Anping will never dare to act rashly. Just for this reason I have a huge advantage. After clarifying his thoughts, the God King relaxed. Although he was still angry in his heart, he was no longer impulsive. Flying the Phoenix fighter back, he had to slowly deal with Li Anping, not only to rescue Christine, but also to rescue Peter Parker.